Okay, hello everyone. My next guest is Mel Ferguson. This is a quite remarkable woman. She wrote a book called Smacked. She sued the government during lockdown, and she's an ex-heroin addict and a recovered one for, I believe, 22 years by now. So Mel, welcome to the show.
21 years. We don't want to over exaggerate my sobriety.
Okay,
21 years on the 1st of September. I got clean in 1999. I was on the streets of Hillbrow. I was a very desperate, broken human being. I wrote this book about 5 years after I got clean, called Smacked. I lost everything in my addiction, which is normal for heroin addicts to do, because what we do is we actually don't give a fuck about anything but getting some more. And that's kind of, for me, the definition of addiction is the need to get more at no matter what cost.
Need to get more. But did you want more heroin or more Hillbrow?
Oh, I wanted more of everything.
Okay.
Even as a child, I mean, I think I was born wanting more. I was a very curious child. Most addicts are bright. I was a high achiever. I was a prefect. I got many distinctions in matric. And then I chose to go down a path where I thought I was being cool, hip, and experimental. And
let's backtrack. Sorry to interrupt you, but this is a fascinating story. So how do you go from being cool? Because my idea of being cool in school is trying to smoke a little bit. How do you go from that to all of a sudden doing heroin?
Well, I mean, at school I smoked and I drank, and I was one of the rebels, and I questioned things, and I never thought that my path would lead me into a huge heroin addiction. But at the age of about 22 or 23, as the country was going into freedom and democracy, the year before we went into our 94 election, I met a guy from London who said to me, "You've got to try this stuff." And because I was one of those people who couldn't say no, I thought, let me just try. Then I'll be able to say I smoked heroin. But the thing is, they say, don't flirt with heroin, it will marry you. And that's what it did. It married me. And I became...
that moment before you smoked heroin, did you try something else like cocaine, dacha, something of this was beforehand, or did you just go straight to heroin?
No. I mean, I started I smoked my first cigarette when I was 4. I mean, I was an early starter. Then I started drinking when I was 9. By the time I finished school, I was drinking all the time. Alcohol, whatever I could get my hands on in terms of alcohol, and I started smoking dacha. I also smoked crack cocaine. So it was a kind of progressive thing. You know, it was like, I've done this, let me try this, and you keep on pushing the boundaries. So heroin was something that was put in front of me. Most people would say no. Melinda went, what can it do? You know, let me see what it's like. And the thing with heroin, it is the most beautiful drug. I'm not trying to get all of you to become heroin addicts, but it's a very...
There's a disclaimer, don't try this at home in the video.
No, don't try this at home. But when you feel like you go to heaven, you get completely... sort of almost, you feel like you're on a cloud of where nothing matters. And if you're a person who gets hurt easily and you're sensitive to the world and the world hurts you, a drug like that can really take you quickly, because who doesn't want to not feel pain?
Right. So was the heroin, as I understand it now, it was a coping mechanism, or was it first a cool and then it became a coping mechanism?
Yeah, no, it was exactly that. It was first a cool, and then it became like a complete, like, have to. And then it was just like, if I couldn't have any, I would not be able to function. I mean, the whole withdrawal thing, you know, if you withdraw from heroin, your body literally feels like it's on a torture rack where your bones are being pulled apart. Your skin is crawling, your nose is running, and all that is going to help you is another hit. And that's how one, you know, just taken.
And as you started taking the heroin, I mean, I imagine the first time the high must have been amazing. So it was really like, pleasure in heaven. Did
Yeah.
I mean, because I've never tried heroin. I've always been scared of drugs. Did it the second and the third try and as the time went on, did you have the same effect, or did it actually diminish as time went on?
No, heroin always gave you what you wanted. That's
Okay.
the problem with that drug. It gives you it every time. And the thing is, it's a warm, fuzzy, it's not even really a high. It's just a numb, a lovely numb. Yeah.
Wow.
But
Okay.
it was the thing that took me right down and made me lose everything.
Wow. And okay, so this was 1994, you say 93?
19, so I started in 1993, 94, and I got clean in 99.
Yeah.
I landed up homeless. And when I say homeless, I mean homeless, like on a farm with homeless people with no money, no clothes, no ID, no money, no children, no family, no husband, just me. Like
Were you
rock
married
bottom.
when you started?
I
Or
had 2 sons in active addiction as well, 2 babies. I
oh, wow.
had a drug addict mother.
Wow. And did your family know at the time that you were addicted?
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, they tried lots of things and then they gave up. In the end, I was actually just all on my own because I'd also stolen, lied, cheated. I mean, heroin addicts do that. You need your fix. So you go and you do things that you need to get things, and you need to steal things, and you need to take things. So no one trusted me. Everyone was sick of me. My family basically disowned me. My husband got clean. I didn't want to get clean. My babies were taken away from me. I went worse and worse until I was really nearly dead.
Oh, wow. So
Um,
your husband, sorry, this is a lot, for my brain to fathom, everything at the same time. Your husband was doing the heroin with you at the same time, and he got
yeah,
clean.
he
Okay.
got clean first, 6 months before I did. He went to rehab. I went to a homeless farm. That was just the way it went. We got divorced pretty quickly. After we both got clean. We both got the boys back, and we've both been clean. He's been clean for about 21 years and nearly 22 years. I've been clean for 21 years and a few months.
Well, that's an amazing story. So, let's talk here. Where did you grow up, and how did that end up in Hillbrow? Like, because you said you were prefect in school. I mean, you had everything going for you. Uh,
Yeah,
you went to university, did
yeah,
you not?
I
Okay.
did. I went to UCT. I mean, I was one of those kids, they would have voted me as the most promising child. I was very, very clever. I did well. I was a good actress. I studied drama at UCT. Everything, my life seemed okay, except I was smoking a lot of dope, I think, at the same time. I went to UCT, but I grew up in Joburg. I was born in Ermelo, but I only stayed in Ermelo for 6 months. And then I decided I'd had enough and
Yeah, I
left.
don't blame you.
Yeah. And we grew up in Joburg. My father died when I was 4. My mother was an alcoholic. And I think that, those kinds of things help an addict. Your father dies in front of you, your mother starts drinking, and pretty much you start getting a sense that the world is not what you hoped it would be as a small child. And then you start looking for things to fix you. And you
So,
start
so, so you confirm the theory that says, addiction, the behavior pattern, if you will, starts in childhood, and
yeah,
then
I
it sort
think
of
all
you don't recover from that trauma, and that's an escape way.
I think all addicts are traumatized children, and I think all people are traumatized as children. So it just depends whether you've got the addictive gene. I think a lot of people have trauma, but not everyone becomes an addict. So I do believe a genetic predisposition towards addiction. But I definitely think your childhood and your social kind of experiences as a human being create the opening for the search for no pain and
Uh,
alleviating pain. I think addiction is about alleviating pain, the attempt to do that. And it's always failed. And it's always fails.
and why does it fail? I'm asking a very ignorant question.
Because nobody who becomes a heroin addict has a bloody good life. I mean, all you do is try and get stuff, and you you become it. I mean, because listen, I'm also into decriminalizing drugs. I don't believe that criminalizing drugs has helped anyone on this planet. I think it's made people worse. I think addicts are what do we call it? Ostracized. Ostracized is the word. Addicts are not treated as human beings. I think addiction is almost like a brain cancer. And if you had to treat people with cancer the way you treat addicts, and that is what society does. So for me, as much as I don't want everybody to be taking heroin, I also know that by decriminalizing and in some way normalizing and not having this criminal thing around people, and that's where we can start talking about the tobacco thing, because it's directly linked to criminalizing and prohibiting people never, ever ends up getting the results that the governments want.
So, yeah, let's start there. When you were a heroin addict, obviously heroin was illegal in South Africa. I believe it still is. I know Dagga is now legal. The heroin is legal in Switzerland, but they give reduced dosages. It's legal in Portugal, but it's reduced and the government controls. But when heroin was illegal, okay, and I'm asking again a very naive question, how easy was it to get heroin, and where did you get it?
I got it in Hillbrow. I got it in my post box. I got it wherever I needed it.
And there was no police. You were never worried about the police or anything of the sort.
I met a lot of police. The police were selling the drugs to the dealers. I mean, that is what was happening. You know, in the late 90s, when I was in Hillbrow, police would raid one hotel, one block of flats, and then sell to the next one. They were completely complicit, and I still think they are, with the drug trade. It has to be. So that's why by criminalizing it, you're actually allowing the law enforcement to actually control the illegal trade, or the gangsters, or whoever. But that's the thing, is that one thinks that, like, if you're going to criminalize it, the police are going to monitor it. But it's not like that. It happens in many countries where the police actually run the trade when you criminalize it.
Yeah, this was true in the 1920s when alcohol was under prohibition. This is true in South Africa with drugs, as you've just told us. Was probably the police that could supply you easily with heroin in the middle of Hillbrow. And, in those days, Hillbrow was a bit better police, quote unquote, than it is today. But I'm assuming that today it's probably still the police or somebody associated with the police or the gangs, corrupting the underground society that is selling heroin. Okay, so you had no problem getting heroin at the time. You were addicted to heroin. And as you say, you were married to a man that was also doing heroin with you. Your children were taken away from you. And, tell me if this question is too personal, but how did you feel when the court took away your children? Did that make you reconsider your addiction?
No, so you assume that the court took them away. They didn't. My mother-in-law took them.
Okay.
I think that was a saving grace, because my mother-in-law just decided she'd had enough of me and her son. My baby was 6 months old and my oldest son was 1.5 years. So they was very small. And we were completely fucked. I mean, we were not coping. We were living in Klerksdorp. That's where his family lived. We were stealing, lying, cheating. I was taking his brother's lawnmower, pawning it, driving to Joburg every day, getting our heroin, getting crack. Our son would be strapped in the baby seat at the back. We'd drive into Hillbrow, just really crazy fucking shit. And his mother one day just thought she decided she'd had enough. So she took them. So thank God I didn't have my boys taken away by the state, because that would have been really terrible. Once I got clean and I proved myself to be clean, I was able to start seeing my boys again.
Okay, so, and did you, let's say between you, the period of getting clean and losing your children, how did your mother-in-law just distance herself from you, or how did that work?
Oh, yeah. No, I was chucked out. I was told to get out. I was taken back to Joburg by my husband, who went to rehab, and I was dropped at my family, and I was told I'd never see my children again. Now, most rational people would go, oh my God, I better get clean because I've just lost my kids. What I said was like, fuck you, everybody. You've taken my children. I want to get high. And it's a very knee-jerk response, but that's what addicts do. You know, we don't have rational thought about like, oh my God, we now need to get better. We just need to get worse. That's what a lot of us do when we are thrown like against the wall.
And okay, so I mean, I'm trying to picture this in my head, that you're losing your children, that you've lost them, and you still want to take drugs and not be with your children. You know, that is a very strong compulsion that a drug has got on your addiction.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I always say to people, is that like, if you can imagine that you've got absolutely no maternal instinct left in you, that the only instinct you have is to find another hit. That's how strong the addictive urge is. I mean, now, you know, it would never make sense to me now, but then it made all the sense in the world.
And if I may ask, how old were you at the time?
So I started when I was about 24. I was around 30 when it all came down. Yeah, I wasn't that young.
That's my age, so I don't know if I'm still young or not, but I'm 30 years old now. So you're saying at my age, you lost your children at age 30, more or less.
Yeah.
Okay. And how long after that period did it take for you to recover, to say, listen, this is the final straw?
So I lost them for 6 months. And so I was about, it was about 31 probably when James and Dan were taken away from me. And 6 months later, I finally woke up on a homeless farm, looked at my life. I had nothing around me. I had no family. I had nothing left. And a small little voice went in my head. It said, you're either going to live or you're going to die. Like, basically choose. And I really wanted to die. I'd had nothing left. You know, I had nothing left. I didn't know if I'd ever see my children again. I was surrounded by all these people that had fallen off the edge of the world, and I'd fallen off with them. And there was just a small little life urge inside me that said, you might as well see what it's like to be alive.
And that's when you decided, did you go cold
stop.
turkey? You just went cold turkey and you said,
I went cold turkey. More. I had no medication. It was a Christian homeless farm, very Christian. There was a joke at the farm saying the only pull you get here is the gospel. And it was true. Like, the only pull, there was no medication for me to get off this shit. And I had to withdraw, and I had to do it all on my own. But you know what? I mean, in a way, that was what I needed. I've always thought, since I got clean, is whatever you get is what you need. I do believe that. So I don't think any of my life in sobriety has had any coincidence about it. Every single thing that's happened has had a meaning, because I've made it meaningful.
So you're speaking here now about, so again, I've got lots of questions about meaning. And the way you describe yourself being addicted is somebody that lost all meaning of life. And then one moment came and you said, you know, to hell with this, I want to live. But after you took that decision, did you, let's say a year or two afterwards, feel again that I might want to go back to that life, that I'm losing meaning again? Because as we age, you know, and as we go through life, we get periods of ups and downs. You know, next year I might lose my job, as an example, and I might be down. Like, how did you cope with those coming downs in the future then?
Look, I mean, from the very start of my getting better, I was highly depressed. I mean, for the first year, I could hardly move. So my biggest fight was not to use again. It was whether I was going to commit suicide, because I had absolutely nothing left. And so I fought a very strong battle with a death urge that literally held me hostage for the first year, at least, of my recovery. You know, when you take drugs, you mess your teeth up. You really mess your teeth up. And I think that one of my biggest moments of realization that I wasn't going to kill myself was when I went and got my teeth fixed. Like, I was lying in the dentist chair and I thought, no suicidal goes and buys and gets their teeth fixed. I mean, who cares? So if I'm getting my teeth fixed, it means that something means that I want to stay alive. And that was quite a turning point. I mean, I also, you know, I was writing I was writing for my life. And I started waitressing. And one night I served a person who I told my story to, and she told me to write my story. And that story got published in a magazine. And that was a real life urge that showed me that maybe I wasn't just a useless, absolute piece of rubbish, and that maybe I could actually do something besides just sit on my mother's bed feeling sorry for myself. I think victims, I think addicts are often, they get stuck in victim mode. And it's all like, poor me, everyone's hurt me, they've taken my children, they fucked me over, my father died when I was 4. And the victim tape goes on a lot in an addict's head, which gives the justification to use. So one of the things I started doing quite early in my recovery was catching myself when I went into that mode. And instead of allowing myself to feel sorry for myself, I started trying to help other people. And I know that sounds really twee, but I went to 12-step meetings. I went to Narcotics Anonymous, and I started doing things like service. And the service thing of like, you know, helping other people makes you get out of your own self-pity and your misery.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
okay, so you feel that by giving to others, that was in a way therapeutic to you.
Totally.
But the way you explain it now to me is that after you took that decision to recover, it wasn't too difficult to find help. You know, you had these structures around you, but the point is getting to that moment to say, I want to change my life. You know, that is the difficult one, if I
The
understand you
biggest,
correctly.
it's the biggest one, because you can go to every single rehab in the world. You can spend hundreds of thousands of rands or dollars or pounds or whatever. If you don't decide that you're going to get better, you'll never get better. Like, I think that it's literally like a switch where you go, I've surrendered. I've surrendered to the idea that I can't do this anymore. It's almost like with everything in life. It's not just drugs. I mean, if you've got a toxic kind of relationship with somebody and you keep on, you keep on, you keep on, one day when you wake up and you say, it's not going to change, I surrender, it's over. There's liberation in that. In surrender, there's the biggest liberation, I believe.
Yeah, I can imagine it's not easy. So let's talk about the police a bit and the criminalization of drugs, right? As you say, the police were complicit in selling drugs, probably, or they were turning a blind eye, like in most countries in the world. But what does decriminalize or criminalization do to the victim? Because why, like, if you can talk to government, like to the police, the Minister of Police, Becky Kelly, or the Parliament, and tell them, listen, I'm an ex-heroin drug addict. I know where people have been. Why should drugs not be illegal? How did it affect you as an addict, the fact that it was illegal?
Well, I mean, the thing with the police is they don't go for the people that are bringing the. I mean, they sometimes do, but on the whole, they go for the addicts.
Yeah.
So it's the guy who's standing in the alley and taking his little hit. They arrest that person. So they do this kind of petty, really ineffectual policing of addicts rather than the source, because often they're involved in the source. So it's not beneficial for them to stop the kingpins, to stop the actual importation, because they're enriching themselves like that. And there's a whole system and there's a whole network. So the easiest thing is to just blame the addict, to demonize the addict and say that the addict is the problem. And they don't really ever go further than that. So you've got a whole lot of scared people who can't go for help because they're criminals. In prisons, addicts, I mean, if you're not an addict when you go in, you'll probably leave an addict. The system in prisons it thrives on drugs and all the agreements people make between each other.
So the system, do I understand you, the fact that drugs are illegal is actually creating more addicts in the process.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I've done a bit of research on the Portugal decriminalized drugs, I think probably 5-6 years ago. The heroin addicts, the cases of heroin addicts dropped by about 50%. Venezuela as well. There are
Venezuela.
yeah.
That's the
There are
first good news coming out of Venezuela.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that it's Venezuela. I went to a big drug conference last year, and I'm sure it was Venezuela, but I hope I'm not wrong. Quickly Google, everybody. There are certain countries that have had a more mature and a more therapeutically open attitude towards people who have the disease of addiction. Do you regard yourself as a libertarian? So, Trevor, this is a weird question because I would like someone to tell me here what they believe a libertarian is.
Yeah, I'll answer that. Essentially, libertarianism, it's got different meanings to different people, and that's why it's one of those words these days that can mean anything depending on who you ask. And generally, it used to mean classical liberalism. So it means that anything, society, governments, any decisions we make has to put the individual at the center of everything. And we optimize human prosperity for the individual. Now, that can range from people who believe we should not have any government, people who are strong in free markets. It can range to people who say power must be restrained. Everything under that umbrella is libertarianism. I always say it's putting the individual at the center of everything. And making this part of drug addiction, for example. I mean, I'm also in favor of legalizing drugs, and I don't do drugs. People can come and test me if they want to. For this very reason, I do not think that the individual is helped by the fact that they're being made a criminal and not a patient in a drug addiction. I think your mic is muted. 1 second. Oh, there we go. Now you've got sound. Sorry, you were muted for a second.
So, sometimes I think about the definition of libertarianism, and then I think, well, Donald Trump would fit the definition on some levels very well, and I think that's probably the problem with labels. So I don't really like to I probably, if anything, I'm an anarchist. I don't like order. I don't believe in government. I don't see any governments that have done their job, and I don't respect any leaders. So do I believe in the absolute supreme importance of the individual? Well, for me, that's a lot of what I was like when I was an addict, completely, and not at all concerned with other human beings. So I think that there's a whole, and I think that that we as human beings are responsible for the bigger as well, not just for ourselves. And that's where I get a bit worried about this idea of being a libertarian.
Fair enough. I mean, we're not here to impose ideology on anyone. Then I've got a question here. Okay, we'll get to your action with government during the lockdown.
I want to talk about tobacco.
Yes. So you wrote a book called Smacked, I believe. What is that about?
It's all about what we've spoken about.
Okay, so that's the recovery phase. So we don't need
harrowing true story of addiction and survival. It's the darkness of addiction, and it's the hope of recovery.
Okay, and after this, send me the link so I can put it in the chat and we can put up.
Okay.
So let's get to government lockdown in South Africa. Coronavirus comes this year or last year, starts in China. And South Africa, all of a sudden we find that there's cases as well. And the government says lockdown, which means stay in your home initially 3 weeks. And we realized it was actually extended throughout the winter all the way to September. And during lockdown, the government creates the command council. It suspends the rule of law, meaning parliament becomes useless. And in the process, they do the unthinkable. They treat people like children. And they say no exercise, no alcohol, and no tobacco. And what was your response when you heard this?
Okay, so yeah, I stopped smoking for 10 years in my recovery. And then I had a very bad, okay, don't ask me about this more. I had a terrible accident and I wrote off a Ferrari. Now, that's another whole conversation.
Yeah.
The Ferrari wasn't mine either. So you can imagine. So I had a freaking 3.5 million rand car on my neck and a lot of bills. And what happened was that I fell apart. I went a little bit mad and I started smoking again. That was in 2015. So I started rolling. I thought, I'm not going to smoke cigarettes. I'm going to smoke organic tobacco, which has got no chemicals in. And I smoke lovely hemp papers. And this stuff, look, it's not great, but it's better than the cigarettes. So this was my moral, organic vibe. So by the time lockdown came, I'd been smoking for about 5 years again and was heavily reliant on my tobacco. You have no idea how insane the government drove me in lockdown. The first 3 weeks I had enough tobacco. I mean, I'd stockpiled. And then when Cyril said we could have tobacco, we were all like, woohoo. And then, of course, Zana Zuma 2 days later told us that it had been prohibited. I seriously thought I was going to lose the plot. And I can tell you what, my addict, that voice, my heroin addict, my crack addict, my dacha addict, my alcohol addict, started screaming very loudly in me. I was shocked by how loud my addict returned. I couldn't believe it, actually, that they could have done this to us. And I wrote a story for the Daily Maverick about my addiction being reawakened.
Yeah.
Having almost impulses of thoughts like, well, if I'm going to die from a virus, if I can't smoke cigarettes, why don't I just try and get heroin? Those were very clear thoughts in my head.
Wow. So just to stop you really considered, and this point needs to be emphasized, that because you could not find cigarettes during lockdown, you considered going back to heroin.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I got as far as thinking, where am I going to get it? But the thought came that it's going to be easier to get cocaine or heroin than tobacco, because I knew a lot of people who were getting stuff, because I know addicts, you know, I mean, I'm in recovery, but I still know addicts.
Yeah.
So it drove me crazy that something that had been very legal, that was not prohibited, that had no schedule on it. It's not a scheduled drug.
Yeah.
That these people had the audacity to tell us this. And then I got approached by BATSA, the British American Tobacco South African company.
Right.
Because I did a lot of Facebook Lives screaming and shouting about the government. Fuck the government. They haven't, you know, like they've taken our stuff. What are we going to do? What are we going to do?
And did Facebook, sorry to interrupt again. I'm going to constantly ask questions because just to get clarity, did Facebook censor any of your videos?
No.
Okay.
No, they didn't. But I was very outspoken on Facebook about the prohibition, about the NCCC, and about the general infantile rulings that had been made, and our autonomy as human beings. And this would probably be a very libertarian type of thing to say, but that our rights over our bodies, our minds, our choices had been absolutely compromised. So that's the lawyers approached me, and they asked me to write an affidavit, and they loved my affidavit because it was all about my addiction, all about my psychological, you know, how the government was actually seriously compromising my psychological well-being. I'd been like into craving again my hard drugs. I'd fought this so much in my life, and now suddenly I was fragile again in terms of what their laws were doing to me was compromising my whole life, actually. I mean, we were very dramatic.
But
and
couldn't
so
you find illegal alcohol on the black market, or illegal tobacco on the black market in South Africa? I was in France, so we didn't have that stupid law, but my understanding was that it was all in the streets, right?
But that's the point. I didn't want to go like a fucking heroin addict in corners and going and knocking on people's fucking windows and trying to actually like reawaken this illicit feeling about like something that was actually legal. For me, it made no sense that I need to now go and pay. This stuff was now being charged $600 for something that is charged $140 in the shops. So there was a lot of rage that I had about the criminal pricing that people were getting away with. And I also just thought, why must I fucking go and become like another scaly junkie when I try and buy cigarettes or tobacco? So that was my argument. I became the third applicant. There were about 9 of us, I think, but most of them were tobacco farmers, tobacconists. They were more like organizations than individuals. I was probably the only individual who was suing the government. And I mean, that case has been going on. And to be honest, it hasn't even been judged yet. It's still going on.
Case is still going on. So you sued the government alongside British American Tobacco.
Yeah,
They paid the fees, I hope.
of course.
And my understanding was during lockdown, there was a ruling to stop these things at one stage, and then it sort of didn't go okay. But you're actually saying that ruling is still to be decided.
Yeah, so they initially, BATSA dropped the case, which pissed me off a lot because I think the government got to them. The first round of the case they dropped, and then FETA, the other organization, took the government on but lost. But their case was maybe not, it was more about the economic kind of a disadvantage of the prohibition. They didn't really go for the personal. And I think the BATSA case was strong because they had me. They had me saying that my rights to my home, my space, my autonomy over my body, my free choice, my as a human being, constitutionally, I'm allowed to decide whether I want to fucking smoke and put this into my body. And so they had a very strong case like that. What's weird is that this case has been delayed, and I'm still wondering whether the government isn't, or the judges aren't just hoping that everybody forgets about it. I haven't forgotten.
And are you pushing this forward? Are they still?
Yeah, I mean, I regularly message the attorneys and say what's happened, and they go, we haven't heard anything yet.
Okay, so there's no response from the courts.
The courts.
Yeah.
And this was now, it's about 3 months now that they've been debating the verdict, which I find to be absolutely insane.
And what court is this? Is this the High Court?
The Cape High Court.
The Cape High Court.
I'm also a smoker. Okay, someone's saying something. Let's look at what they're saying. France. I'm also a smoker, and I felt similar to Melinda. I was not asking the government to supply cigarettes, as the free market was willing to do this. I merely wanted the government to not restrict or obstruct my free market choice. I was somewhat sympathetic to the government decision initially in the light of damaging your lungs could make the virus spread more easily argument. But when this argument was shown to be invalid, the restrictions were still not lifted, which seemed totally arbitrary. I agree. France.
That is correct. So the decision was totally arbitrary. My understanding is in South Africa at the moment, you can now buy cigarettes. Is that correct?
Mm.
Okay, so did that solve your wanting to go back to heroin problem?
Yes, but listen, I mean, don't go a little bit too wild. I didn't actually want to go and use heroin again. I just thought it was like an irrational thought of if you're going to make me go and score, then why don't I score for real? You know what I mean? If scoring tobacco is eliciting this fear and anxiety in me, where I'm putting tobacco in my trousers and I'm, driving past roadblocks and thinking that someone's going to stop me. How different is it from me trying to get heroin? So, I've got a brilliant life. I'm a successful publisher. I've published close to 60 books in the last 7 years.
Wow.
I've managed to channel my addiction, my addictive nature into something very creative. I've got a huge amount of energy. I always say to addicts, the amount of energy you use to go and get drugs, use it to make things. use it to put life into this world, use it to put something of use into this world. And it's amazing how much energy we actually have.
And so you're still involved with helping other addicts recover as well?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of talks when I can, and I still go to these, I still attend online meetings, 12-step meetings, sharing, talking. It's you know, I'm always going to be an addict. So it's part of my duty in a way to also try and share a message of hope that we can recover.
Yeah, that's quite a positive thing, that you can turn all the negative experiences into, you know, something positive. And I think that is, you know, it's something I hope you continue to doing. I'd like to ask if anyone else in the chat would like to ask you, you know, personally a question. If they want to, please raise your hands. I'm kind of out of questions as well. And if not, just, you know, you can write your question as well. I guess next question.
Viv
Sorry.
asked something, but I think Viv, she says, I understand that addicts have no control and we should have empathy, but demanding that government supply you with your drug, cigarette, like she did during lockdown, is a bit of a cheek. Viv, when did I demand that the government supply me? I said the government must allow tobacco to be sold. I never said the government must give me my tobacco. I demanded that they should allow people to choose to buy.
Yeah, that is correct. You asked for your own freedom to come back. I've
Yeah.
got a question here from Trevor. I'm gonna ask you to unmute yourself, and you should be able to. Just give me 1 second. Sorry, Trevor. Ask to unmute as well.
Hi, Mel. Thank you. Fascinating talk. I'm transfixed by it all.
Thank you.
There's a long-standing debate in libertarian circles, goes all the way back to a friend of mine called Jim Harris, which is addiction a characteristic over which you have no control? In other words, it's something genetic or a factor over which you have no control, or is it something that you can control by sheer effort of will, rational mind, etc.? What I'm asking is it beyond your control, the fact that you're addicted to certain substances, or do you?
Yeah. I mean, I believe that. I don't think it's the same. So a lot of people go, oh, I'm a cocaine addict, but I can drink. Or I'm addicted to sugar, but I can control my something else. So I think that if you're a real addict, and like I'm talking about, like when you are a proper addict, like not just someone who has an indulgent personality and who likes to binge drink on the weekend, because I think that there are a lot of people who can control substance use. And I don't believe that all people have got problems with it. I think people can have a good time. They can get drunk, they can get high, and they'll get up on Monday morning and they'll go back to work. I think when a person is an addict, they lose control over their lives. And that is almost the defining difference between someone who is enjoying or using substances and someone who is unable to control. So for me, I could not control my use of anything. When I was drinking.
By definition, you did control it, because here you are.
Well, it wasn't a control, it was surrender. Now, there's a big difference. So controlling it would have been waking up and saying, I'm not going to use today, I'm not going to use today, I'm not going to use today. And then by 5 o'clock going, maybe I'll use. So that whenever I try to control it, Trevor, it always landed up me using again. So I could control it for like 2 days and I wouldn't use, but all I could think about was using. When I finally surrendered, I lost all need to try and control it. And in the surrender, out of the control, I got to find a serenity that I didn't need or want to. I didn't think of using. Besides, You know, obviously there've been a few times in my life, my mum died of pancreatic cancer. I really wanted to get drunk. I didn't, but I wanted to. But I knew that what it was it was pain that was making me feel like it. So I still argue that it's not about controlling, it's about surrendering.
And do you feel that when you first started, I know this is years ago and, you know, well, memory escapes us, that the first few times it was loss of self-control, because you said it was just, you know, you want to be cool. You know, how long did it take you before being cool and being in control, which is what all addicts say when they start? How long did it take you from that point to be totally, I'm compelled and I've got no willpower?
Well, it probably happened quicker than what I thought, but I went into denial. So that's the other thing that happens with addicts, is that we have amazing ability to deny truth and reality. So even though I was waking up, like after probably a few months of using heroin, I was needing it every day. But all I could say to myself was, it's so nice. I don't have to use this. I can stop whenever I like, but I'm going to have it now. So the levels of denial keeps the addict pretending or making up stories that they don't actually have a problem. And, you know, for a long time, even when I was really clearly problematic, I was still telling myself this lie that I didn't really have a problem. And that's why it's so hard to penetrate addicts and their denial system, because the more they use, the more they act as though they haven't got a problem. So you've got like this insane thought pattern happening.
So you're lying yourself into more and more addiction.
You just lie and lie and lie and lie until, and nobody outside can understand how you can't see it, but you literally are the last person to see it.
So would you say that's a form of self-deception then?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think that addiction is like, it is the lie. The lie is addiction. It's like the whole thing is based on one big lie, that it's going to actually make you feel better, that what you're using is going to make you feel better. And the thing is, it might temporarily make you feel better, but in the long run, it's just going to completely fucking destroy you.
Yeah, that's true. There's a comment here from AK. I'm going to read it to you. It says, thanks, Melinda, for being so honest and for continuing to help those who have the addiction problem. I find it sad that after you and your hubby got clean, then then divorced, without becoming too personal, say if it is, why is that? So why is it that after you, and say if it's too personal, why when you and your husband both got clean, why then did you get divorced? You know, you would think you'd get divorced when you're high.
No. Yeah. No, it's not too personal. God, I've shown you all my dirty laundry tonight. You know, the thing with us, we were triggers for each other. So we just had to look at each other and we'd know we were going to go and score. And I think we terrified each other. So he got clean. He quickly met another woman. He quickly met a nice woman in rehab. So by the time I got clean, he had already moved in with this woman. And I was devastated because I did want to stay with him. I mean, they had my 2 children, and I had to start sort of scraping my life up, and the 2 of them looked like the happy couple in the movies. But it was quite clear to me after a while that we had actually tainted our energy with each other, and that we were never going to be able to actually return to a place of forgetting. You know, when you've done something terrible together as a couple, you can't forget. And that reminder of ourselves as addicts, I think, was going to be very difficult for us to stay clean. The chances of us probably going back and relapsing and using were probably high if we were going to stay together. So now I look at him and I go, thank God I got away from him. And he's been a great dad, and I've been, I think, a good mom. But we were much better apart than together.
And he also never went back?
Never.
Okay, so the 2 of you made a poisonous combination from the sound.
Yeah, we were like Sid and Nancy. Bad shit. Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to know if anyone else has got any other questions. We still have 9 more minutes. we can ask that. Yeah, I guess what I would say is that the story sounds remarkable. You know, you don't hear a lot about heroin addicts turning their life around 20 years later, becoming an author. You've published, I mean, you mentioned the amount of books. I forgot the number now. That's, you know, it's a huge,
Yeah. Anyway, lots.
lots of books. And I'm guessing that writing is a way for you to express yourself, and you found your talent in writing. So I guess tell
Yeah.
people what do you write? Because I'm guessing it's not just all recovery. You can only write 1 or 2 books about that.
Okay, so I mean, when I say publishing, and I think lots, I mean, I don't think you might be confused, but I publish books, which means that I put books together by other people.
Yeah.
This was a book, the Lockdown Collection, that I got together with 40 authors. Very good authors in South Africa, and it was during lockdown, where I just felt like we were all so terrified and we were so imprisoned by this crazy shit. And I still think we are, by the way. I'm very good at inspiring other people to get their shit together. So I published this book. There's a beautiful book that it's called Meditating with Rhinos. That's coming out tomorrow. I've got books everywhere. So basically, I went back to university when I was in about 2012. And I decided I'd been so trashed at university, I was going to study an honors degree in publishing. And I went and I studied for 2 years at Wits part-time, and I got my own publishing company. The year after I finished as at Wits, I got given it, actually. I mean, I'm very lucky. And I started publishing other people's writing. And so I've had some really cool books in the last, it's nearly 8 years now that I've been doing that. So I've written 6 books and I've published about 60. I've written another book called Hooked. I've written another book called Crashed. I wrote one of the Oscar Pistorius books called Oscar, an Accident Waiting to Happen. And I co-wrote a book with Chris Haney's daughter called Being Chris Haney's Daughter, with Lindy Wehani. And I wrote another book about an R&B singer called Kelly Kumalo. So I enjoy writing, but now I enjoy, I suppose, facilitating other people's books.
Yeah. And what does writing mean to you? And Trevor, after this, you're on.
Well, it gets me in touch with my soul. It gets me in touch with who I really am. And it makes me speak to the deeper self, you know, even if nobody reads what I write, if I'm just writing to actually find out what I think. I mean, writing has been a beautiful relationship that is not tainted by a human being. You know, you have a personal relationship with what you write.
Yeah, that's a very interesting reply. I always ask writers that, and they all give me a very personal answer for writing. It's never, I would say it's never about the readers. But I find about good writers, they don't care about the readers. They care about their story and them, I won't say themselves, but they care about expressing themselves in a wonderful way. Trevor, I think it's your turn.
Okay, thanks again. Most of the time, libertarians express opinions about things like drugs and addiction from the outside looking in. So I'm fascinated to get your opinion from the inside. Would you, if you had the opportunity, outlaw access to drugs? Would you prevent or forbid people from having access to drugs? And would you insist on attempting to save drug addicts, making programs available to them at state cost, etc.? What is your opinion on the...
I would definitely decriminalize drugs. So I would make them available. But through a monitored and through a proper system, like some countries have managed to do, like Portugal, Amsterdam. Holland used to have like a heroin program. I'm not sure if they still do that. And I would definitely want the state to form places of help for addicts. I think it's the state's responsibility to help those who are suffering. As much as I would imagine that everybody should have a plate of food to eat and that everybody should have shelter. I do believe addicts should have the right to recovery.
So I would rephrase that in saying that we must move away from the paradigm that drug users are criminals and we should start seeing them as patients.
Yeah.
Portugal, in my view, is one of the best systems. In Portugal, the way it works, drugs aren't entirely decriminalized. It's regulated what you can and can buy. If you're a heroin addict, you get reduced dosages, but you need to be, if you get that, you need to go to a AA Anonymous, if you will, and you need to speak out about your problems. And this is why drug usage in Portugal has decreased. Switzerland had a similar program of giving reduced dosages. I'm not sure on all of the details. But the point is that, and this is, I wish if somebody in the courts and in the reform system can listen to us, is drug users are not criminals in the sense of criminals that steal our money. They are patients and they need to be treated.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, is there's so much taboo still around addicts. And I mean, it's difficult to fight for people to like addicts because addicts do abominable things. Addicts hurt other people. Addicts do things that are reprehensible. Addicts do things that are not socially acceptable. But one of the big reasons I think for that is because society has not taken care of the broken. You know, in many ways, society breaks people and it doesn't nurture and it doesn't help those that are in need.
And obviously in South Africa, we've got lots of brokenness, given the high crime rate, given the violent past, present violence. And drug usage is, I think, it's something that a lot of people overlook. But I think we will be surprised to see how common it is. And it is not just common among the poor. It is common among everyone. The statistics show that everyone has it, does it.
Yeah. I mean, in Narcotics Anonymous, they say they're like addiction has no bounds in terms of race, religion, you know, finances. It's a disease that strikes everyone across the board. You know, most families have at least one addict that they hide away in the closet and hope that they don't come for Sunday lunch.
Yeah, so I've got a last question for you on, probably not the last because some people will still ask, but question for you on drugs that are currently legal. So currently alcohol and sugar is legal, right?
Yeah.
And we know that your reactivity mentally to sugar is about the same as it is to heroin. It's the same compulsion addiction, and there's a great deal of evidence to suggest that sugar is a far great gateway drug than alcohol. Something I wish people would take more seriously when they look at their diets. But how do you think the current way that we're treating alcohol and sugar and cigarettes is the right way to do so, or is there room for improvement there?
Well, I mean, sugar's not even seen as a drug. Sugar's put into everything. I mean, if you look at what any types of food, most food has added sugar. I mean, it is, as you say, the one thing that has completely been like not given any attention as as something that could be problematic. That was what the irony was. I think that was part of our court case, was we were saying, listen, if you're going to say that like things are bad for you, like diabetes, if you're predisposed to diabetes, you're going to probably die from COVID before you're going to die if you're a smoker. But no one was paying any attention to that. Look, alcohol has always gotten on my nerves as the one drug that has been used to celebrate, to endorse, to use at business place, as you know, for business meetings, for funerals, for weddings. It's the most pervasive and most destructive drug of all of them. but I still don't think it should be prohibited.
Yeah.
I mean, I think its damage it far outweighs even heroin. If you look at the actual societal damage, the physical damage, the relationship damage, it ticks all the boxes. But it's endorsed, it's used widely, but I still don't think that anyone has the right to prohibit it.
But do you think, though, that culturally people should start stigmatizing it as opposed to outlawing it? Will that make a difference? For example, heroin is stigmatized culturally. Now, I don't have the stats, but I assume there's fewer people using heroin than alcohol, for example. Do you think stigmatization can play a role, as opposed to, and I'm not talking about criminalization, I'm making a very big distinction between stigmatization and criminalization. Do you feel like stigmatization plays a role in discouraging people from taking drugs?
Well, I mean, I think if it wasn't, I suppose, used for all these occasions in the way that it has been, and it wasn't the thing that you needed to toast and celebrate and do all that stuff, because it's something that people don't even question. You know, when I stopped drinking, it was very hard. I stopped drinking at the same time as I stopped using heroin. But I mean, alcohol was probably the harder one to avoid, because wherever I went, people were trying to give me a drink. And I'd say, like, I don't drink. And they'd be like, come on, man. Like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And a lot of the pressure around alcohol, you know, I think if someone tries to actually stop and most people's close circles, family, friends will put pressure on you to carry on.
Yeah.
So stigmatization, but like, who's going to stigmatize it? That's what I ask.
Yeah, that's something to think of, because that is a suggestion that some people have. In Portugal, for example, they still stigmatize, but they don't criminalize.
Yeah.
And they feel that there's been success in that policy. Mel, we've run at the end of our hour. I'm going to say thank you again. I'm going to sign off YouTube, and then those in the chat, I'm going to unmute and they can ask you personal questions.